Now, while Santon bankers might have secret ambitions to emulate Brad Pitt in the cult classic movie Fight Club, the reality is that most of them wouldn't stand 60 seconds in a cage with South Africa's mixed martial arts experts. In its cover story this week, Finweek went to find out more about the economics that are driving one of the fastest growing sports on the African continent. For more, we have Finweek's Garth Theunissen, Cairo Howarth, Director of EFC Africa, and Dirk Steenekamp, Editor-in-Chief of Fighters Only magazine. Well, this is taking sport to new heights. Apparently, it's a big trend around Africa. Thanks for joining us for this session. Mark, let's get your thoughts. An interesting choice of cover.
Yeah, I think it was quite interesting. I mean, basically, the background to it is about 3 months ago, I was driving into Santon, and you've seen quite a lot of the big billboards there promoting the EFC fights, and Carnival City have been doing quite a lot of promotion of the actual sporting side to it, and it was quite interesting because there's always been this idea that sort of boxing is the closest thing we come to fighting type environments, and what was interesting about this was there's actually a real business developing underneath this, and I just found it interesting that it seems to have moved away from that seedy side of the whole, we used Fight Club as the intro, but it's not that underground movement anymore. There's some real economics. It's got good viewership. I mean, one of the things that comes through the story is it's one of the fastest growing in terms of television audience on the African continent, and it's something you would never have thought of if having done some of the research to it. You find that this is actually a real business. Big businesses are being built both locally and internationally, and I think it was quite a cool story just to look at.
Cairo, are we saying now move aside cricket, rugby and soccer, it's now about mixed martial arts?
Mixed martial arts does have a very broad appeal. Something like rugby is big in South Africa, but not in many other countries in Africa. Same with cricket, big in South Africa, not many other countries in Africa. Soccer is obviously the biggest sport from a fan following and from a participation point of view. But mixed martial arts does fill a gap and does seem to strike a chord with fans. And we've been seeing that on our TV ratings, and we've been beating rugby and cricket and all traditional sports that people think are large, and we have been beating them on the continent and globally, with our television broadcast numbers.
Should investors be looking at this space in terms of deploying piles of cash because of extensive returns?
Well, I mean, if you look at clothing brands and companies that have started, there are people that have launched their brands and they're doing 20, 30 million rand a year within their first year of doing business in the clothing sector, specifically with MMA brands that have been successful overseas. So there's many other businesses that comes along with the whole MMA thing. Sports supplement companies, obviously there's the apparel and clothing things that really do well in this particular market.
Garth, are investors taking this space seriously?
Well, I was speaking to Cairo just before we walked into studio, and I think the interesting thing is, are sponsors taking the sport seriously?
Sounds as though there's traction.
Yeah, I think there is, but we were talking about the perceptions that people have towards MMA, and apparently a lot of sponsors are quite reticent to get involved because they're worried, well, do we want to associate our brand with fighting? But it is becoming a very formalized sport. If you look at just anecdotal evidence, speak to your mates, everyone is interested in MMA. A lot of guys are giving up the gym and training, going to MMA gyms because they're tired of lifting weights. And yeah, I think there's sponsors probably need to look a lot closer at this segment. Apparently, males 18 to 35 are moggy about the sport. So if that's your target market, maybe you should be chatting to these guys.
I think just to touch on that, internationally sponsors get great traction with mixed martial arts. It's a passionate fan base, actively engaged, and who do love the sport, so it's easy to talk to them. And even locally, we have had a big uptake with sponsorship. We signed up 5 new corporate sponsors in the past 12 months, so the guys have been coming on board. And I think what it really comes down to is value for money. We're offering bigger TV ratings than traditional sports, and we're offering it at a fraction of a price, and an engaged, passionate fan base to interact with.
May I ask which corporates are coming on board? You say you signed a couple of new ones recently.
There's Muscle Farm, which is a supplement brand. We've had Tap Out, which is a clothing brand. We've had One Time Airlines came on board from a partnership perspective. We've had Bet Exchange, which is a betting company.
Internationally, where is cage fighting the biggest? What experience are we drawing from here?
Probably Brazil and the North American regions are the biggest. That's pretty much where the sport was born and where it grew from.
And Africa, I see a lot of the article refers to the traction that we're seeing across the continent. This is not just a South African phenomenon.
Yeah, I think that I mean, you and I were chatting a little bit off air as well. I mean, there's a huge opportunity in Africa. I mean, there's big audiences there, very engaged audiences, and they don't use. I mean, South Africans tend to be very good at following things. They tend to look for YouTube, for instance, and they'll follow YouTube. Whereas you'll see Nigeria has got a lot of their own offerings, which kind of fill that space and engage a Nigerian audience. So I think that one of the things that does seem to be coming through on the African continent is a decision to actually own the space themselves and not simply replicating what everybody else is doing. I think they're trying to own and engage on those platforms.
And if you are a sponsor and you want to reach out to the African market, you know, as Cairo was saying, this appeals more broadly than, say, something like rugby or cricket, which is sort of more regional, Southern Africa, maybe, you know, in cricket's case, around Kenya. But this is something that everyone can relate to. And I think, to be blunt, human beings have this sort of primal fascination with watching two, you know, people come to blows and see who's going to come out top. So.
Just in terms of the growth, sorry Mark, the growth on the African continent, I've been travelling extensively of late, and we regionalise the continent now. So you've got East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa. Where are you seeing the most traction? Is this West Africa, Nigeria, Accra, Ghana driving the space?
Definitely. We get a lot of athletes coming out of those regions, and that's part of our expansion plan. It's twofold. It's one, getting the top athletes from those areas, because obviously then that gets the local support and the fan following if they want to watch their fellow countrymen, and the second is to get the television broadcasts in those different countries, and it has been going well, but definitely Nigeria and Ghana is right up there.
Mark, you were going to make
how
a point.
How do you keep it clean though? I mean, I think that's one of the issues was that when the original cage fighting, the idea is kind of no holds barred, and it's a messy kind of industry, and I think that when sponsors look at it, they think it's not something I want to attach my brand to. I mean, how do you kind of weigh that up and say keep it as a clean industry? You don't want it dominated by sort of the whole cockfighting type environment. You actually want something that is sufficiently engaged.
The reality is it's a proper professional sanctioned sport. It's overseen. Our referees and judges and rules are put in place by PROMA, which is part of SASCOC. So it's a legitimate sport. It's safe. We do brain scans on all of our athletes before they compete. So technically it's actually much safer than boxing. Another example is our fight doctor, Dr. Ewout van der Linde, is the same doctor from the Sharks Rugby Union. So he literally, he looks after the Sharks rugby team, and he says, after a couple of events, he said to me, Cairo, this is hilarious. I have less injuries after one of your nights or fights than I do after a Sharks rugby game to deal with. I mean, it's literally...
Puts it into perspective.
Yeah, puts it in perspective.
Just finally, 5 years from now, how big do you think this opportunity is going to be in mixed martial arts?
Well, it can be right up there with soccer for the African continent. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The whole global scene, mixed martial arts, has taken over from all the big sports, and there's no doubt it pretty much has soccer to beat.